Okay, so should Christians use AI? Part 3. But this time we're going to deal with an objection because, there's people saying like, okay, yes, we're saying that AI, Christians should use it. However, I can hear the peanut gallery out there saying, well, what about the environmental impact? What about AI and sustainability, particularly for us, right? Because,
Right.
Our mission with Southside Blooms is to use sustainability to alleviate poverty. It's central to our work and to who we are. Obviously, as Christians, creation care is a big aspect of our faith practice and being a steward of, his creation and his world. So I can see someone thinking, well, isn't this a contradiction because you're all about sustainability? You got solar powered flower farms, you're using compost, you're using recycled newspapers for your packaging, but now you're promoting AI. You think AI is a good thing? Like, won't that undermine the environment? So what do you think about that?
So I think that one of our favorite series is The Machines That Built
On the
America
History Channel.
on the History Channel, The Food That Made America, all these things. And what stands out to me is, just this push to innovate and how, that changed society basically. And we see that with the internet. It was like this push to innovate. And while there were environmental consequences, I feel like within that, people start to innovate around the innovation, right? So you create it, and then I feel like there's a better understanding of it. And then there are more things that are done in conjunction with it that kind of help to alleviate maybe some of those initial harms, I guess. But yeah, I feel like sometimes you can't quite know, first of all, the total impact, how to innovate around that until you fully understand it. So if we just say, okay, well, we don't understand it and we're going to kind of like go against it. It's already here. It's already here. It's already happening. So we need to understand it to be able to then understand how to innovate around it to continue to put those guardrails in place that will help, alleviate some of the environmental burden.
Well, and this is the thing, when you talk about environmental impact, you talk about new energies, right? New disruptions, right? I think it's more helpful to couch the conversation as trade-offs and less as good, bad, good and evil. That binary thinking isn't helpful and it's not accurate, right? Because reality is even maintaining, if you want to maintain a first world lifestyle, it comes with a significant environmental impact, right? If you want to have the convenience of, smartphones and computers and cars and airplanes, like there's a trade-off for that. So like when I was at the University of Denver and I was getting my master's in environmental policy and sustainability, I remember my professor saying the greenest energy is the energy that you never used, right? But the reality is most people don't want to live that way. Most people aren't trying to go back to the caveman days where you don't have the conveniences. You don't have indoor heating in the winter. You don't have air conditioning in the summer, right? Where you have to walk everywhere, but it's green, it's super green. So I think like if we're going to accept the fact that number one, all of us at some level want to be a part of a first world lifestyle, then we just got to then accept that comes with a certain energy cost, right? And a certain environmental cost. And to your point, it becomes more about how can we innovate around it to try to mitigate those impacts, to minimize, some of the negative aspects of it. Looking at a little bit some of the history of energy transitions, there's a time where wood was very popular, right? Where people used wood to heat their homes and that kind of thing. But then that led to what? Deforestation, right? So then you had something like whale oil, which was very popular, right? And well oil, there for a time, was kind of seen as like, hey, well, maybe this is a greener alternative because it's not contributing to deforestation. But then, people start using well oil, but you have to start killing whales. And now, you're wiping out the whale population. People are like, oh, no, this is not good, right? And then, you end up later having like petrol oil, right? And people start looking at petrol oil as maybe this is like a better alternative because, it's got more energy intensity in it. It's not going to kill whales. It's not going to contribute to deforestation. But now we got like, all the carbon and greenhouse gases that produce, right? So this is just the trade-off if you want to have a more modern society, right? So I think like, with that kind of backdrop and that kind of understanding, it's more of like, okay, well, what are the trade-offs if you're looking at this from a sustainable impact, this being AI? One thing is that, yes, there are definitely negative impacts in terms of water usage, definitely power usage, but some of the ways that can be offset is like we're talking about in our previous video about spreading the gospel. If you can basically disciple anyone across the world because of AI, then guess what? That means you don't need to physically be there. That means you don't need to get on a plane, fly halfway across the world, get into a bus, drive up country to then hold some Bible conference to disciple people. You can disciple people remotely. That saves all sorts of energy, right? That minimizes all sorts of environmental impacts. And that's just one example, right? So I think like the way we should look at it, in my opinion, is yes, we want to be sensitive to some of the negative immediate costs are pretty obvious to it. But at the same time, we want to try to innovate in a way where the way we're doing our business and doing our work requires less transportation, right? Requires less fuel, requires less shipping of materials and that kind of thing, right? Because even if you have, like, say, an online program that AI is able to really manage, this is the thing AI allows. It allows for customization, right? Because not everybody learns the same way. Not everybody's interested in the same thing. So if you're trying to do a discipleship program and, maybe the thing that I'm struggling with and the thing I'm trying to get there, I'm trying to grow is my finances, right? But maybe you got someone else and we're both in the same area, the same community, but they're struggling with relationships. AI gives you the ability to really tailor and customize for that person's individual needs without necessarily having to have a person there to do that. Now, am I advocating for AI and essentially remote learning education to replace human beings doing that person? Of course not. AI, technology in general, will never replace the works of the Holy Spirit. It'll never replace praying, spiritual warfare, human relationship, and not forsaking the assembling of each other. It'll never replace that, but it can augment it. In particular, you're talking about spreading and transferring knowledge, right? Because, maybe that discipleship program, they're in community, like you're talking about like your cousin Nate in Zambia. He has a team out there. They're in community out there, but maybe they want access to deeper knowledge, deeper teachings. And Nate can't physically be there all the time to do that, right? So using AI to be able to augment the local community they have, I think is a great way to do it. And it's also a way to do it in a way it's less resource intensive. It's not as expensive. And, we even see it with ourselves, right? Like we've got our kids and we homeschool. For those who don't know, we do homeschool. And, our kids are part of Liberty University's online academy. And our kids, they basically just use their laptop. They follow their curriculum. It's a accredited online private school. So it's actually a private school. So technically, even though we're homeschoolers, our kids are really in private school. And, you think about, if you want to talk about the environmental impact, our kids, like they do pretty much all their work online. They're at home. So we're not having to take our kids, we're not having to drive them to school every morning, drop them off, pick them up. A bunch of kids are in a school building. Like obviously, you need to heat that building, you need to cool that building. So our kids using the internet and using AI, because, they do have AI applications and, they're the curriculum in that program. It really does help to simplify our lifestyle and minimize our own personal lifestyle impact because we're not having to transport and move around as often.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks, wifey. Appreciate it. Okay, so that is our thoughts on
sustainability
and the objection.
Yes.
Very passionate about it, as you can see. All right.